Morning and welcome. My name is Ona Alston Dosumu. I'm the CEO and Executive Director of the California Lawyers Association. And this is the first in a series of programs we're doing on careers in the era of COVID-19. This series is part of our ongoing effort to really respond to the needs of the legal community in the state of California during this unprecedented crisis. If you're tuned into this webinar, we hope, of course, that you're already a member of the California Lawyers Association. But if by chance you're not, I want to really our Career Center resources to help you practice law in these unprecedented times, including court updates. We check all 58 courts in the state, plus the appellate courts and the federal courts twice a day. We've got resources, again, continuing legal ed and other resources to help you practice, as well as resources for the public. So again, please go to calawyers.org if you're not already a member to see what we have to offer. Part of the impetus behind developing this series on careers was really a recognition that this crisis is causing people to do a lot of soul searching and really sort of examining their lives. And our thought is that a number of people may be wondering whether or not they want to continue doing whatever it is that they have been doing professionally, or do they perhaps want to consider, a new chapter, in their professional lives. We are extraordinarily fortunate, and I'm deeply grateful to be joined by two rock stars in the in-house legal placement arena. An old and dear friend, Deborah Ben-Canaan, who is head of the National Practice for In-House Placement at Major Lindsay and Africa, and someone I'm proud to call a new friend, Lee Hanson, who's a partner both in New York and in San Francisco with Heidrick Struggles. She runs their CEO and board placement practice and is responsible for many of their important high-profile chief legal officer searches. So again, I want to express my profound gratitude to both of you for sharing your expertise and perspective with the California Lawyers Association community. Let's just jump right into it. I want to first give each of you a chance to talk a little bit more about your practice and your firm. Why don't I start with you, Lee, and tell us, sort of what life at Heidrick has been for you so far, and then we can get into the more specifics of the program today.
Sure. So thank you, first of all, very much for having me here. So very quickly, by way of background, I've been with the firm now for, it'll be 25 years in a couple of weeks. I have a legal degree, but early on decided I was more interested in business than going to a law firm. So I went to Wall Street and spent the first part of my career there before coming to Heidrick Struggles. Heidrick is a retained search firm, and we have various practice areas, including CEO, board, but also our chief legal officer practice is a significant portion of our business. I split my time between those two areas. There's a natural connection between the general counsel and the board. So I really enjoy both of those areas, but our practice spans all industries. We do work at senior levels across pretty much every industry for companies, nonprofit organizations, educational institutions. So that's what we do and what I do.
Awesome. How about you, Deb? I know a little bit, but share with the audience.
For having me speak today. It's just an honor to be a part of this. So I am a partner and the senior practice leader for the in-house practice at Major Lindsay in Africa. Major Lindsay is close to 40 years old. It's the largest legal executive search firm in the world. I am coming up on 19 years with the firm. We place attorneys in law firms at the partner and associate level and at the executive level within companies, temporary placement. We are an inch wide and a mile deep in terms of our recruiting backgrounds. I am also a recovering attorney and practiced for about 5 years, and then I turned 30, and then I joined Major Lindsay in Africa. So if you do the math, you'll get an idea of how old I am. But my focus is on in-house placement, primarily at the senior level, but Major Lindsay does in-house placement at all levels.
Awesome. So let's kind of dive right into this. We were chatting earlier as we were preparing for this, and I know that both of you were kind of in this business, as it were, in 2001 and in 2008. How bad is it out there? How does this compare to those downturns? And, if you can do a little kind of contrasting, I'd love to hear your perspective. Why don't we start with you, Lee?
Sure. Yes, I do remember 2001 and 2008 very well. They were different. They were both crises for sure, but for different reasons. So 2001, I'd been in the business about 5 years at that point. And it had been a bull market. Things have been very strong. 2001 was a tragic and horrific and sudden event that nobody could have seen coming. And I think we were all frozen for, a few weeks trying to figure out, is this going to recur? What's going to happen? But my memory is that, over time, we relatively quickly came out of this. It was tough for probably 9 months, 12 months. But then we went into a very significant recovery after that, which lasted for, several years. And we had some of our best years in 2003, 4, 5. So I think the world came to a sharp halt during that period of time, but then gradually people got more confidence that things would recover. So 2008, very different, obviously, with the financial crisis. We could see the glimmerings of that coming into, in 2007 with a mortgage crisis. So there was more, it was still, very sudden when, Lehman and, other Bear Stearns went down. Again, 2009 was a tough year for all of us, but by 2010, things got, back in gear, and the rest of the decade was really a bull market. This is a different one because there's so much uncertainty. Yes, the government is coming in, they're providing stimulus funds, and but we just don't, there's just so many uncertainties as to how long this is going to last. When is a vaccine coming? Is it, is it really going to take a year and a half to come? Are there, so until we really know, it's hard to know what the recovery is going to look like. Obviously, if we knew, we would all be very, very wealthy and doing other things. But this feels very different to me than the other ones did.
Deb, did you want to add to that?
Just to say that I started recruiting in July of 2001. So moments before 9/11 and the dot-com crash. And my first 11 years with MLA was in Southern California. So the dot-com crash was particularly impactful. My understanding is 2000 was a phenomenal year for hiring. So, learning in that market was very different. Lee's absolutely right. This is different because nobody knows how long it's going to last and if there's going to be a second wave of it in 6 months. I also think that this is going to change how business is conducted permanently. Right. So I don't know, I think we have yet to see what is going to be the final way we do business, how people hire, there's a lot of uncertainty right now.
So, we were chatting sort of before we went live and began broadcasting. Between the two of you, you have a really kind of an overview of the country, right? Deb's practice is national. I know MLA is national. Lee, you're both in New York and in San Francisco. Two areas extraordinarily hard hit by, this pandemic. Are you seeing geographic differences? Are you seeing industry differences? Is the pain evenly distributed? Or is it, are there places that you can kind of point to where there are little rays of light?
I will just give a quick overview and tell you that I think the hospitality and airlines industries have been just decimated. Healthcare, med device, pharma, there still seems to be some hiring, obviously, a necessity of hiring that needs to be done in those markets. So for me, what I'm seeing is more industry related than it is geographic. Mm-hmm. Of course, geographic, industry is part of geographic in the sense that, the financial services industry isn't primarily in New York. It's they go together, but for me, the differences are mostly industry related.
Yeah, I would absolutely concur. Obviously, you hit exactly what I was going to say. Hospitality, airlines, travel, any of those industries are just really suffering right now. Retail, obviously, you've seen all the, what's going on with the bankruptcy or financial difficulty announcements. I would say in terms of the hotter segments, I agree on healthcare. I also see in technology some increase because, technology is less position centric, unlike retail, unlike travel. I mean, technology is, behind the scenes. I mean, we talked about Zoom, company like that is seeing yes, they're doing very well. So that's what I would see. It's more, industry and specific company driven rather than, location necessarily.
So, if you're fortunate enough to have, a job now, would you advise people to, even if they're interested, to sort of start putting out feelers now, or is it still too soon? What would your advice be to people who are, going through this crisis, right, and thinking, geez, I'm not sure if I want to continue doing this?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll start. I guess it really depends on your own circumstance. I mean, we always advise people, even if you're happy in your own role, being totally heads down and not having eye to the marketplace is not a good career strategy. In the best of times. You just want to know, and it's not necessarily driven by what your market worth is, but just what other opportunities that you may not know about by keeping your head down. And you may look and decide, I'm perfectly happy where I am. What I have is better than but you're better with more information. I would say in this market, I would still give the same advice. There are people who are really, in a really good market. We've seen people just leave jobs they're unhappy with and are confident that they can find a new one. This is a different market. So, if you're truly unhappy in your role, you should probably leave. But if you're modestly happy, but things could be better, I would say hold on, but hold on to what you have, but look outside and put out feelers. And it may take longer, and it probably will take longer. But I think the same advice is still relevant.
Thanks a lot. Go ahead, Deb.
Never leave a job without having another job unless you can help it. Goes along with that.
Conventional wisdom.
Now is a really good time to be working on updating your resumes. I don't know if Lee sees this, but I think a lot of times lawyers don't remember what they did last week, let alone last year, because they're working on big, meaty things. And so I always tell people, and I know it's a little lectury, but keep a document somewhere to write down all of the cool stuff that you've done. And now is a good time to update your resume. Don't just stack a bunch of stuff on the top of your resume, but really holistically take a look at it. There are still, now is a good time to connect with people. People are clamoring for that personal touch now. So now is a good time to just reconnect with people you haven't talked to in a long time. I mean, it's networking in a different way. But there are still companies that are hiring. Just be cautious about the whole thing.
Thanks. That's a sound advice, and advice that I've given to at least one of my children who was contemplating grad school. I sort of said, maybe you just want to stay put for a while, because I happen to know she probably wouldn't like very much if it's all virtual. So, you know, a different context, but same concept. I know both of you, and we've got a couple questions from the audience, and I want to turn my attention to them. So audience members, keep them coming. I do have one quick question for you, Deb. I know you both obviously have very, very deep experience and specialize in helping folks go to in-house positions, but MLA does all kinds of legal searches. What are you hearing from your colleagues about what's happening, you know, sort of not in the in-house market per se, but at firms and with other employers?
Right, thank you. I took a survey of people I work with that do law firm associate and partner placement kind of all over the country. And consistently, countrywide, there have been RIFs, there have been pay cuts, partner and associate pay cuts, truncated summer programs, start dates pushed out. It's not one size fits all for all firms, and I think the middle market firms have been hit harder than the larger ones. In law firms, real estate is suffering, obviously, and we saw this with the last two recessions. There was an uptick in bankruptcy and healthcare work, and actually, given the federal funding, there's an uptick in white collar and fraud litigation because of, you know, the federal subsidies. One of my partners said that the real impacts of COVID will be felt later this year. Most of the law firms had extremely strong year in 2019 and the beginning of 2020. So their first quarter results were strong, but big drops are coming. One just point, you know, because we're talking to the California Lawyers Association, our recruiter in Northern California said that firms are being very strategic and are actually doing hiring. They're looking in the pharma and life sciences and other specialized skill sets. So they're still seeing some activity.
Interesting. Thanks. So I've got a couple of questions from the audience here. And I think I'm getting a lot of them. I may not be able to get to all of them. Just for the benefit of people who are in the audience and sort of listening in on this, I meant to mention this at the top, but I forgot. If we cannot get to all the questions, we will gladly, Deb has offered, and we will find a way to also do it via CLA's LinkedIn presence, either my personal or CLA's LinkedIn presence. But long story short, if we don't get to your question today, we will try to answer it via LinkedIn, and we'll collect them all. So shifting gears a little bit, I think this is one of the first questions that I got. You know, there's a sweet spot for people to go in-house, as I understand it, and from, you know, my experience and perspective. One of my prior life was an in-house role, you know, that I entered into when I was, you know, sort of a mid-level to senior associate. And so I generally, at least unless things have changed, most in-house opportunities aren't really available to people who are just fresh out of law school. So there's that kind of dynamic. I've also gotten some questions, though, at the other end of the spectrum, right? For a whole host of reasons, people who are very experienced may not necessarily be ready to stop working and may, in fact, be looking for another, you know, another opportunity and another chapter, and not to, you know, stereotype, and you know, but I think women in particular have a slightly kind of career trajectory, and it may not be as linear. So if you're not in that sweet spot, if you're at either end of sort of the younger, less experienced end, or the older, very experienced end of sort of the spectrum, what advice would you have for people? And why don't I start with you, Lee, and then we can go to Deb.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in terms of very early stage, you know, our clients really are, for the most part, looking for people to get that terrific training you get in law firms in the early years. So if they're doing recruiting directly out of schools, are typically doing that on their own. But for the most part, when we get involved, there really is a preference for somebody who's had, at least a handful of years of experience at a very good firm, who can bring that training, because they just don't have the bandwidth to train people in the way you get in a law firm, in the variety of work. On the other end, on the more seasoned end, I'm actually seeing more clients be interested in people who bring real seasoning. It's not in every situation, but I've seen it in a couple of situations where there may be, particularly at the general counsel level, if there are people in-house who have real promise, but they're not ready to be the general counsel. We have on occasion brought people in with call it a 3 to 5 year time frame, whose real mission is to bring those people along so that when he or she retires, there is at least a good successor or two in place. And I just think in difficult times where you want people who've seen, been around the block, who've seen different scenarios, who've, perhaps brought different experience from different industries, different kind of companies, who can, more and more of my work is actually looking for more seasoning than we might have seen in the past. I don't know that that's a COVID related issue or just something I've seen over the last couple of years. So Deb, I don't know if you've seen the same.
So I agree with you on the junior end. Lawyers like to think very linear, like people like to look at lawyers with a very linear career path, right? Couple of years of training at a really good law firm, then you go in-house years 4 to 7 as a corporate counsel, and you work your way up into the general counsel role. Lee's absolutely right. They want that sort of training. They want to know they want to know your story and that you got all the pieces in check. I think one of the problems with people who stay too long at law firms is that they price themselves out of the market because the comp is so good in a big law firm especially. And then they don't want to come in at anywhere under a general counsel role. And I'm guessing you would agree with me on this, Lee, that 95% of my clients do not want a general counsel who has never been in-house before.
Right.
Yes. Now, if you've never been in-house before and you want to be a general counsel, I think the best way for you to do that as an aside is through your clients or networking. It gets harder and harder to work with a search firm. On the more seasoned end, this is a touchy question, obviously, because some people are going to make inappropriate judgments about people that have too much experience. I can tell you that, we will put forward anyone who is qualified, who will take the money, who is a cultural and substantive fit, right? If they're a good candidate, I'm going to put them forward regardless of, if it's 15 plus years, if they have 25 or 30 or 35 years, if they're good for the job, we will put them forward. I don't, employers at that point make decisions that they make, but, I can speak for me and I'm going to speak for Lee too and say we will put forward the best people for the jobs regardless. There's a lot more bang for your buck when people have more experience. They get a lot of benefits out of that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I agree that there is often that bias. It's does the person have enough energy? And we will push if we think a candidate is a really strong candidate. We'll absolutely say you really should see this candidate. At the end of the day, it's their decision, but we're going to give them the best advice about the best person.
Absolutely.
I was on mute here. One of the questions from the audience is, for a litigator looking to move in-house, what tips would you give? The question is for crafting a better cover letter. I'd ask you to broaden your response and generally speak to people who are, let's say you're, sort of in year 3 to 5 in a firm and you're thinking that in-house might be where you'd like to land. How do you position yourself?
I could start that and just say, It's easiest for you to go in-house in a litigation role and then broaden your experience. In a law firm, you're more likely than not to be in a practice group and not get the additional experience. But when you move in-house, legal teams tend to be leaner. And so if you raise your hand and say, I'll help with those commercial contracts, you know, I'm not looking for any more money, I just want to be a good corporate citizen, they're going to give you that work and that will broaden your practice. Now, that said, I think there are some very large general counsel who came from litigation backgrounds. You know, more now than ever before, especially with crisis management, somebody with a litigation background is of a lot of value to a company. It's not your traditional, you have to be a corporate securities, M&A, corporate governance type lawyer. Sometimes it is, but not all the time anymore. That's changed a lot over the years.
I would completely echo that. I think it depends a little bit on the industry and the company. You know, financial services, highly regulated businesses, you know, are more likely to be open to a litigation background. Having said that, somebody at the general counsel level, you need to be broad enough. So I think your advice of somebody who goes in from a litigation background relatively early, you know, raising your hand to learn more. If your aspiration, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't to be the general counsel, but if it is, you know, trying to get as broad an exposure internally as possible, whether or not you ultimately end up as general counsel at that company or some other company down the line.
For what it's worth, I was a general counsel and came from a transactional background, but my deputy and the first hire that I made was someone with a great litigation background. He is now the general counsel, and I will tell anyone who listens, that he is, in my opinion, an extraordinary lawyer, and in many ways probably was much better suited for the role than I was. And so I think but he did exactly what you said. He, sort of came in as, an associate GC and just learned everything that I was willing to throw at him, and I was willing to throw things at him. So one other question, and then I want to shift a little bit, and I've got some other questions that are lower down that I can't read yet, so I will try to read those while you answer this one. You talked about a cultural and substantive fit. What do people need to know about making this transition from in-house to, from a law firm to in-house? Because they're very different jobs. And I don't know who wants to take it first. Why don't we start with you, Deb, since you're the person who used that phrase, and then Lee can follow up.
So cultural and substantive. I mean, substantive, some of it, by the time a company comes to us and candidly writes us a check, they want what they want, right? In terms of substantive skill set, cultural fit, industry background. Sometimes they're willing to consider and think outside the box, but a lot of times they want exactly what they want. And that's why they come to us, so that we can go find them exactly what they want. So substantive fit is going to be what's on paper. What have you done? If they need somebody who's managed people and who's been in board meetings and understands how that works, then you have to have that experience. Otherwise, as good, as smart as you are, unless the client is willing to consider people out of the box, they need that expertise. The cultural piece is very soft. And I would tell people to remember that the cultural piece is being assessed from the moment you get on the phone with Lee or myself. We are making that assessment. Every time you talk to our admin to schedule a meeting with us, we are making that assessment. When you walk in to meet with us, we are making that assessment. We do a lot of behavioral interviewing to make that assessment. Culture is going to be very different from company to company. Some of them are going to be politically conservative. Others are going to be, not. Some of them are going to be very casual. When I was in Southern California, I remember meeting with somebody who was managing a team of 150 people, and he was in flip-flops and shorts, right? That is a cultural piece that if you're used to wearing a three-piece suit every single day, you might not feel comfortable in. EQ, we're constantly looking for little things to make that assessment. But what you need to know is that each company is different, who's going to be a good fit there is going to be different based on the organization from the CEO on down.
Yeah.
Lee, you want to?
Yeah, I completely echo everything you said. I think, the skills that are recognized in a law firm don't necessarily translate to skills that are recognized in-house, or that the emphasis is different. So, in a law firm, you want to be the smartest, hardest working person you can be, technical expert. For an in-house role, those things are nice, but what they really want, business acumen, being able to really put your business hat on and not just your legal hat. We do, and Deb, you do too. A lot of searches where unfortunately the person just wasn't successful in his or her role. And we're replacing that person. And it's not a fun search to do when you're, unfortunately pushing somebody out. But invariably, it's not because they weren't an excellent lawyer. It's because they were the person who always said no. It took a very legalistic, very strict view, as opposed to thinking, no, you can't do it in this way, but let's figure out how you can do it in a legally compliant way. Was a problem solver, was a good manager of people, was a good colleague. So it's a very different job in so many ways. And that's even true at a mid-level or a senior level person. So I think you need to assess, if you're thinking about going in-house, what is it that motivates you? Because if you really love every day solving knotty legal problems, that's probably not what you're going to get in-house, and you're better off at a law firm.
I agree with that. I had a general counsel once tell me that when you're at a law firm, you have to do A+ work every single day. But when you're a general counsel and you're in a board meeting and everybody turns and looks to you for an answer and you don't have the first clue, you have to be ready to give them your best options, right? It's sometimes a B- answer, and that's okay. But for people who like to have it right all the time, or who are timid about making a decision, this in-house is not the right fit. You've got to be ready to kind of roll with the punches
and make decisions with limited information. I remember many times having to do that. And I will add my little pet peeve to the list, and then turn to another question, a variation of which has popped up several times in the audience Q&A. But I would also add, having been a general counsel, that it's really important that folks who are in-house know how to communicate with the other managers, with every other stakeholder in the organization, which doesn't necessarily mean that you're sending them a 15-page memo with, on the one hand, on the other hand, but really they want to know an answer, right? That was an important learning curve for some of the folks who worked with me. So I've got a couple questions that are in the same vein. I will read you the one that is framed most starkly. How would you explain a stealth layoff by AmLaw 100 firm to a potential future employer? There are people, obviously, who are being, who are losing their positions, including in firms. How do you talk about that? I guess, Lee, I'll start with you.
Yeah, it's, I would say be honest. I wouldn't create a story that, isn't right. The temptation would be to say it was really my decision. But, we do references on people. First of all, there is nothing shameful about being laid off in this environment. It's a very different environment, and it doesn't mean, you could be an excellent attorney, but you were the last one in, or they don't need this practice area right now. So my advice is always people, here's exactly what happened. Here are people you can talk to about me and my performance. Because it is certainly not a deal killer that somebody has been let go. What is a deal killer is if the story is fabricated and we find out that there's another story behind it.
Going back to the 2001 to 2008 crises, One of the things that we noticed were that people were sort of fudging dates on their resumes to close gaps. That is the worst thing that you can ever do, right? You do not ever want to tell anything but the honest truth about what's happened, because, you know, if a reference is checked, or if we have an old resume on file and it says something different, not only are you not going to get that role, but the firm is not going to work with you again.
Right.
So, you know, being truthful is hugely important. I remember seeing an onslaught of resumes of people after the 2001 crisis that had gone from very big technology firms into these .coms and got laid off. You see a pattern, right? It's not their fault. Most of those companies fell apart. Everybody is doing layoffs in this, you know, in this day and age. So there's nothing to be ashamed of.
So tell the truth. So let's say you've been laid off, and in addition to looking for your next opportunity, which may be tough in this environment, depending on kind of what your practice area is, how would you advise people to sort of fill the time, as it were? Would you advise them to take contract work if it's available? Would you advise them to maybe do consulting or what have you, if it's available?
I would. I mean, you know, staying busy and committed, I think it is a good thing. I think if you've ever had an entrepreneurial itch and that opportunity comes up, this may be exactly what Deb said. This may be the time to try it, even if it's not successful, but, you know, it broadens your experience. So anything that keeps you current, engaged, intellectually engaged, I think it's also going to help you present yourself when we all come out of this.
Right. Right.
And interestingly, the contract market right now, I mean, it's cyclical. Contract market right now is getting hotter, you know, because companies don't have the budget to hire somebody in their legal budget, but the contract work falls in a whole other bucket. And so they can bring you on, and that could be a segue into a new permanent role or into networking with different people.
So I'm going to pick up on the word networking. There are a couple of questions here, and I want to transition a little bit to, you know, sort of networking generally, and what your advice and counsel is to people about kind of how to network in this environment. Deb, you just said sort of reach out and connect with people earlier in response, just, you know, reach out and connect with people that you haven't been in touch with. I have another question here that asks, you know, about kind of the nuts and bolts of how firms are hiring or companies are hiring virtually. And I know you both talked a little bit about how both of your organizations are adapting. So I realize that's probably kind of three questions. So why don't we start with networking, and then we can talk a little bit about, you know, as a practical matter, how are you finding your candidates? How are you, you know, Deb, I know I've worked with you before, and I know that, you know, one of your first steps once you know, sort of qualify someone on paper is to meet with them in person. We can't do that now. So kind of how is this all working? Lee, why don't I start with you and go to Deb?
Well, on the networking issue, because I think they're two separate questions. So I'll start with the networking one too. You know, I think if you know, the reality is a lot of people conclude, you know, think that search firms of various sorts can, you know, really control the hiring market. The reality is, I think it's fair to say, you know, 30%, 25 to 30% come through us, but the rest come through, you know, people who know you. So, you know, never underestimate. And the trick is doing it so you're doing it in a very thoughtful and not annoying way. And I think it's true for the search firms. It's probably true for your network. You know, don't abuse it by going back to them too often, but reaching out to people who you've worked with in the past, who know you, who want to be supportive, prior mentors, and just saying, if you hear of anything, I'd be really grateful. And help them out. Here's what here's what I'm looking for. Here are my parameters. I'd love to, this kind of company, this kind of geography. I want to be flexible, but if you see something that looks like this, I'd be really grateful. And I think that's, that's true when they're speaking with us too. We have, I will, spend time to the extent I'm sure this is true of Deb. We could spend our entire days meeting with people who are looking for jobs, and we wouldn't be effective because we wouldn't be employed, because we have to, we have to fill the assignments we have. But if it comes from somebody, if it's a referral from somebody I really respect, as a favor, I will talk to somebody. If somebody's background looks really interesting, I will talk to that person. But please don't expect that next week I'm going to call you with something, because it's so much opportunistic as when we have the right thing. And we have a term in our firm, and I'm sure you guys do too, Deb, the stalkers who, will come back to you over.
Flyers.
Right. What do you have for me? So just, and that's true of your own network. Don't abuse it, but don't forget about people who, who are well networked themselves, who might be aware of something.
I am 100% behind you on this. I tell people all the time, networking, look at every interaction you have as networking. And now it's got to be more virtual than in, in person, obviously. But each interaction is networking. You can do passive networking by making your LinkedIn profile robust, because sometimes recruiters who don't want to hire us look online. And that's I've seen people get jobs that way, just by reconnecting with people on LinkedIn and updating their profiles. If you're in-house talking to your outside counsel, they are highly incented to get you another GC job. Right? That's business for them. Talking to us, Lee's going to have different jobs than I'm going to have. And I think it's important to note, on the in-house side of things, Lee and I are paid by and are hired by the client. So it's great for us to know amazing candidates. But if I met with candidates all day, much like Lee, I would have no searches for anybody to I would have no business. So we try to be a little bit discriminating in terms of who we meet with and how often we meet with them and how often we talk to people. Please don't take that personally at all. Networking can be done through reconnecting with tools like Zoom or FaceTime. I mean, I think one of the things that COVID-19 has done is made us all a little bit more sensitive to wanting to help other people. So if you reach out, you're likely to get a response. Sure, I can take 15 minutes and talk to you. Maybe it's by phone, maybe it's by FaceTime. But I think there's a lot of options there. The second question you asked was about how interviewing is done now.
And just generally, like, how has your work changed as a result of this sort of crisis?
So we're not flying all over the place interviewing people in person anymore. It's all video conference now. Which is why, the fact that we know people, for years and years and years helps, because we know how to check their references and we've met them before in a social setting, or we have interactions with a lot of people. Very few people are not known to us. Like Lee and I together have been in the market, 40 something years. Which is amazing, because we're both like 25.
Yeah.
Right. You started for 12.
But, I have had a couple companies do some critical hires all virtually.
All virtually.
All virtually.
Getting to end. Huh.
The whole thing. And they're onboarding them virtually. And then I've had some others where that cultural fit piece has become so important to them that they'll do the initial interviews virtually, and they're just waiting to do the final rounds in person.
Yeah, that's exactly our experience. I think it's really the range. We've had searches that started pre-COVID that have been put on hold. We've had searches that are started, will likely cancel, is my guess, because their businesses are just going to be, maybe they'll take it up in a year, but it's effectively canceled. There are some, if it's a mission critical search. We have started and ended a search during COVID. Same where it was. Now it's somebody that I've known for years, so it makes it easier than somebody you've just never interacted with before.
Right.
I think clients who are demanding deeper referencing around the cultural fit when they haven't had an opportunity to meet in person. Maybe more people at the company will meet that person. Maybe for a general counsel role, bringing in more board members. So there's more points of contact around that person. But I would agree with you. I think it'll be interesting when this is all behind us. I don't think we're going to go back to the way we did it before. I think there will be more reliance on Zoom and other technologies like this. I think we'll all be getting on planes less often. So I think, that's I've had one client who is getting together with a finalist. They're doing a socially distanced, literally walk in the park, so that there was at least some personal, even if it's a little artificial. So, and we'll see how this evolves. I mean, I would not have predicted that clients would be willing to make hires virtually, and they are. Not everybody, but they are.
So you touched on the on-hold phenomena, and my other child was interviewing. He's in a professional services, but not legal, and was interviewing for something, and it has been put. He progressed, and then it's on hold. And I happen to know a number of organizations have put all hiring on hold, frankly, including ours. If you're a candidate, how do you assess, or can you assess, whether on hold really is on hold and they're going to get back to me when we come out of this, or on hold means, it may be on hold forever? Deb, then.
Yeah. This is a hard question, you're right, because from the candidate's perspective, they are interviewing for this one role, and that's what they're thinking about constantly. From our perspective or the employer's perspective, one minute they might be thinking about this role, and then the next minute they're thinking about how to fill out the new forms to get, subsidies, and do they have to take the temperatures of their employees when they're coming back to work? And they're thinking about 1,000 different things. So the hiring of this candidate becomes less the forefront of their mind. I mean, the short answer is there's not much you can do about it. Some of these truly mean on hold. Some of these mean they're done. And you won't know until you get the circle back at the end. Now, one of the upsides of working with a recruiter is that part of our job is to keep the ball moving on a search. It's to keep things moving forward. And trust me, and I'm going to speak for you, Leah, trust me when I say, we want these searches to close. Yeah. We want them to have great candidates. We want to close them. So we are actively checking in without being, rude or annoying. We're trying to check in to make sure that, is this going to move forward? Is this not? And the second we know something, we will be in touch with the candidates to let them know, because we know it's hard to wait.
Right. And we have no incentive. There's no incentive on our part to tell somebody it's on hold when it's really not going to happen. I mean, because we have relationships with candidates too, even though we're paid by the client. We have longstanding relationships with candidates that go back years and years, and there's mutual trust there. So if we mislead them and say, hang on, it could happen, and we know it's not good for anybody. So, and I think Deb's right. I mean, we just don't know in some of these situations. There was, I've had a couple of clients where there was going to be an IPO, and that was the driver. They will still need, a general counsel if they go public. Right. But if they, who knows when that's going to come to life. So it's very case specific what on hold really will mean a few months from now.
So another question about, sort of, I guess I was going to say from a candidate's perspective, but it's not really from the candidate's perspective. It's from both perspectives. Are you seeing more flexibility with respect to, geographic location for these roles, more flexibility for telework? I mean, certainly the conventional wisdom, as I understood it, used to be that, you don't sort of go into a job asking for all kinds of flexibility. But one thing that we've learned from COVID-19 is all the stuff that people swore up and down could never be done and could never happen. Suddenly it's happening. So are you seeing more, like I said, kind of flexibility around kind of alternative arrangements for candidates?
I would say yes, for sure. And I think it used to be, well, it's so interesting, the whole idea of commuting to a job. There are some, and it's often driven by the CEO at the general counsel level. The CEO is either fine with it, or they're absolutely not fine with it. I think now you're seeing more, realizing that work can go on if the person isn't physically in the office every day. Work can get done, relationships can get built. And nobody is relocating right now in any event. So, and people understand that. So, how this plays out again, it's uncertain, but I think there will be much more. I know one search where they started saying it's adamant the person be in San Francisco. They're now saying, well, maybe this person could work out of the East Coast, and they have to come back to. So I think this whole period of time has really shown a light, and some some people work well in that environment and some don't, and I think that's also coming through with these interviews.
Yeah. I call that working from home versus responding from home.
Right.
There's a big difference.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So taking a little broader aperture and going up a few thousand feet, you guys place folks in in-house roles. I've got a few questions sort of in the Q&A and around, I've been a general counsel. I've worked for firms. I've been a partner in a firm. I don't want to stop working, but I don't want to do either of those things either. Once upon a time, and Lee, your career is sort of evidence of this, people would go in-house and then move to the business side.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit in general terms about what you're seeing in that regard in terms of, people who sort of are like the three of us, recovering lawyers, and what other things they can be doing?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I talk to a lot of general counsels about going on boards of directors. I mean, that's something a lot of people want to do, and that's a whole other topic we don't have time for today. I think that the environment for that is getting a little better than it has been in the past. It's still not an easy, I want to be on a board, therefore I'm a governance expert, therefore I can get on a board. There's still room to go before that's the case, but I think there's more receptivity to that. What do I see people who've, sort of later in career, they want to do something else. It could be advising other people, whether it's consulting with new general counsels in terms of how to be the best general counsel he or she can possibly be. And there's some, very good examples of retired general counsels who've gone on to do that, very, very effectively. On the business side, if I'm seeing that, it's typically somebody who has done that within his or her own company, been a general counsel, taken on more responsibility, shown that they can do more than just the general counsel, and then move over, whether it's a CAO role or actually a P&L role, which is a little bit more challenging, but on occasion we've seen it. It's very hard to go from company A as a general counsel to company B in a business role. I haven't seen that.
Deb, what do you think?
You're a good example of somebody who came out of a law firm and went into a company not in a legal role, and then moved into a legal role and is now in a business role. If you are currently a GC in a company and you can get them to give you a P&L, that's a great thing to have under your wing for your next role to go into business. But Lee is right. If you've been in law in a traditional practice your whole career, and now you want to be a CEO or a COO or what, it's a lot harder to do to make that leap. I have seen big company CEO or big company GCs go become a GC of a nonprofit or take something completely different, to shift their career a little bit when making the big bucks is not as relevant. But I think it's a tough transition.
Well, thank you both. We have we're getting close to running out of time, but I have got a bonus question that I wanted to throw out to both of you. Can you talk about one of your most interesting, fun, or unusual recruitments, and what made it interesting, fun, or unusual? Lee, why don't you go first, and then Deb, you can go.
Okay. Well, this one was one I did relatively recently, and it's totally outside of my area of, one thing I love about my job is learning about new companies. And that to me is fascinating. So we took on the general counsel search for Activision last year. So got to go to the company, tour the facility. I'm not a gamer. About that industry and what's going to fit. That was we ended up placing a woman out of Google. So that's what just jumped to mind in terms of just a fun assignment.
So now I'm going to embarrass myself and ask, what games do they produce?
Oh God, don't hold me. I'm
All right, moving on to Deb.
There are people
and
on
you
the
think you weren't going to be able to figure out. Too advanced for us.
Deb?
I thought a lot about this because, it is fun to do different industries and different things, but I will do a self-explanatory one and say it was a long time ago in Beverly Hills, and it was for Playboy. And that was a fascinating, it was a First Amendment, trademark protection. Playboy Bunny is one of the most illegally copied,
right.
Marks out there. What was fascinating was going to see The Office, which, had its own bar and had pictures, had a lot of pictures on the wall. That's one of those searches that people self-select out of for whatever, for reasons that are, maybe obvious or not obvious, but that one was a fun search because the subject matter was just really interesting.
Right.
Yeah,
that is very interesting. Very interesting. So I want to give each of you a chance to make any kind of closing comments that you might have, final thoughts. And Lee, I'll start with you as my new friend, and then go to my old friend.
Well, and this, I was just going to say, both Deb and I have been around a long time, as we've talked about, and seen bad markets. And yes, this is not a great market, but there will be light at the end of the tunnel. It will come out, and there'll be new opportunities that come as a result of this crisis that we can only begin to imagine. So it's a discouraging time for a lot of people, but I would say hang tight and, keep your skills honed and your spirits up, and, we'll see what happens when we get out, but there'll be, the market will come back. Mm-hmm.
This too shall pass. I have been, we're 8-9 weeks into it, and I go through periods of, a lot of emotion about all this, and then periods of overwhelming gratitude. There's a lot of bad that's happening right now, but I've not been able to spend this much time with my daughter in a long, long time, and this much time focused on my mental and physical health in a long, long time. We're never going to have this kind of period again. So to try and put a spin on this, tell you to take advantage of this time, because it's pretty extraordinary to have it. And I would just tell you, please feel free to connect. I won't volunteer you for this one, but connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm, happy to be a resource for you if I can be.
Thank you so very, very much, Deb, Lee. I really appreciate your sharing your wisdom with the community. To the audience, if we did not get to your question, we're going to try to answer these via LinkedIn. So follow Deb, follow Lee, follow me, and follow the California Lawyers Association. I am deeply grateful to you for participating via the Q&A, and again, to Deb and Lee. This was absolutely extraordinary and very generous of you. To CLA members, stay tuned for the announcement of the next program in the series. And on that note, I hope everyone has a fantastic day. Stay safe and enjoy. Bye.
Thank you.